Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this iteration of the New Hanover County Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Today is September 14th, 2021. At this time, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I will go ahead and call roll as well. Ms. Craven?
Here.
Mr. Wildebohr?
Present.
Excellent. A quorum is present. Moving on to item 2, approval of today's agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, any discussion, additions, or deletions?
Yes, sir. I would like to remove 2230 board committees. We did not get as far as I wanted at our last work session, so we'll put that back on one more time, if approved. And I'd also like to pull 6140. It is not ready to move forward. The board needs a work session with Shaq. I'd also like to add policy 2335 to be discussed in conjunction with policy 2330, board meeting agenda and advanced delivery of meeting notes are the two policies in question there. I don't know if how we add these in, but I'd like to talk about our next meeting, moving personnel policies in the 7,000 series to November so that our new assistant superintendent of HR can be with us. And then replace that with perhaps series 9,000 series in facility, if that is something that Mr. Anderson is amenable to. If not, then I'm amenable to moving anything in the place, so that we can move 7,000 down. And then I don't know if this is something we have to discuss necessarily, but there's been some confusion of late on some of our policies and where they stand in the status. So I'd like to have us have a little talk about how we report out what we did at our meetings, at this policy committee meeting, to try and alleviate any further confusion. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 changes.
Ms. Crable, I'll go ahead and make an announcement at the end of the meeting with regards to the policy schedule. So I don't think we have to add that to the agenda. I'll just make a quick comment when we adjourn.
Okay.
And we can also have that discussion at the end there. I'd also like to delete policy or remove policy 6524. That one is not ready to be discussed either.
6524.
That's correct.
Actually, that one can go ahead. Sorry.
Ms. Brinson, you ready for that today?
Yes, I've had conversations with multiple people and Ms. Stagner, and we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Motion carries and the agenda is agreed to. All right, moving on to item number 3, approval of the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. So I hope you've all had a chance to study them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
We'll give it to Mr. Wildebohr. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a hearing none. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wildebohr?
Yay.
I vote yay.
Don't
All
sound,
right, item number,
sound so
item
interested.
number 4. Come again?
I said, Pete, don't sound so interested.
Item number 4, policy updates. So Ms. Ray
We
Mill,
didn't do the other minutes. We didn't do 8, 10 minutes.
I was
Oh, the-
passing them in mass. I didn't ask her.
Yeah.
I just said we had 2 sets to pass.
All right, well, I have a comment on 8, 10. Can we go back and can I make a motion to rescind that vote or can we just revisit it?
You have to rescind it.
All right, I'm going to rescind my motion to approve both sets of minutes as presented.
So you're making a motion to reconsider.
The motion was already, right, the motion already passed to approve both sets of minutes, so you would need to have a motion to reconsider the approval of the 8, 10 minutes.
Okay, motion to reconsider the approval of the 8, 10 minutes.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Craybill?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Ms. Craybill, go ahead, please.
Okay, so I wanted to add to our minutes somewhere that we officially had on board with us Dr. Skipper as a representative of PAPA. Because we had talked about that in a in a previous board meeting in the 7/13 board minutes that we would look into inviting them. And so I don't know where it goes in there because it's not really a policy. It's not really a policy update because we didn't do anything to the policy. We just invited another member to our another non-voting committee member.
Do you want to name a person or just,
We can say PAPA representative, that's fine, because it's going to rotate, is from my understanding.
right?
So, and kind of like in that vein, welcome Sherry Ashley as the representative this month.
And I believe the proper terminology is NC Papa.
I'm sorry, NC
I believe
PAPA?
that, yeah, I believe it is.
PAPA, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Miss Ashley. So yeah, so can we just put that in? I don't know where to put it in, but
Wouldn't it just be up in the beginning where it says non-voting members?
we could, I mean, she's already on there, but this is new. So and this is going to be ongoing. So I wanted to just because it's not going to be Dr. Skipper every time. It's going to be a representative from NC PAPA every time. So, but I wanted that included in the minutes.
Just let's put it somewhere. We had that discussion, I believe, toward the end of the meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was at the end of the 7/13 minutes. It was right before we adjourned is where that was.
Ms. Joy, could you please make that correction for us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then
Thank you very much.
this is something I wanted to ask Deborah about. I don't think, me personally, that it's an issue, but I had one of our board members who attended wanted to know if the meeting minutes were accurate because her name wasn't mentioned as having attended. It's my understanding that our minutes are supposed to capture basically the gist of what was said, but not verbatim what was said. Like, what was said and not necessarily what actions were taken, but not necessarily exactly what was said and by whom. So I said I would bring that up, so I wanted to just get some clarification on it.
Yes, that's correct. The minutes are a record of 2 things. One, that the procedural requirements were met so that there was, it shows that there was a quorum, et cetera. and 2, what actions were taken, what was accomplished. And that's for open session minutes. And so it's not a transcript. You don't include, what people said. You include that there was a, discussion of a particular item, and it shows the motion and the outcome. So,
Okay.
if there were people in attendance, at a meeting, it doesn't have to show that there were people in attendance. This does look like Mr. McManus and Ms. Walker are listed as non-voting members, even though I'm not sure they're members of the committee, but they're non-voting attendees.
Right. And that was what it was, is that Ms. Walker wanted to make sure that all of her comments got into the minutes. And
That's not the purpose of minutes.
Okay. All right. So then I'm good. That's all I wanted to clarify, to make sure that we had captured that correctly.
Motion to approve the minutes from 13.
So the motion is to now accept the minutes from 8:10 meeting, 8:10:21 meeting.
Motion to approve 8:10. Is there a motion?
Yes, I just did that.
Second.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Minutes are agreed to. All right, moving on. Our first policy update is policy 2230, board meeting agenda. Ms. Craig.
Okay, so this one I brought forward again because I wanted for us to have discussion about the section where it said, it's in section B, first sentence, each board member will receive a copy of the proposed agenda 5 days prior to the meeting, and the proposed agenda will be made available for public inspection or distribution when it is distributed to board members. So on that, so I wanted to, I'm proposing that we add in that not just the proposed agenda and supporting documents available for 5 days prior to the meeting. And just so you'll know, I did a little homework on this one, and I looked at Pender County's policy on this, and they only say 3 days, and they don't include their public in that. Brunswick County says 3 days, and they don't include their public in that. Wake County, I couldn't find. Charlotte, couldn't find that. They don't even have this policy, and Guilford didn't have the policy.
Ms. Craybill, if I might just make a comment, even if a policy doesn't say it will be available for public inspection, as soon as it's a public document. So if a member of the public were to ask for it, it would have to be provided. So as soon as it's available as soon as it's completed, it's a public record, and the public could ask for it. So even if it's posted in the policy.
So my point was, does proposed agenda include supporting documents, or is it just the agenda? Because in policy 2335, it definitely refers to supporting documents. So I was just thinking that our 2330 and 2335 should mesh in our language. So we haven't gotten to the 2335, but I guess we kind of need to look at them together. Oh, wait a minute, let me get back to our own policies. It says, number 3, any supporting information or materials that would assist the board members to become informed of the issues proposed for board consideration. So policy 2330 doesn't talk about supporting documents, but policy 2335 does. So my question was, does when we say that we are posting the agenda, does that include the supporting documents? For us, it does. For us as
Ms. Grable, I think an issue is access to the attachments on the agenda.
Yeah, that's
I
what
don't know if I would go as far as, right, I don't know if I would go as far as to term those supporting documents, because that could be anything, anything that was used to help create the agenda. So I think, to get to where we're trying to get to, it would be my recommendation that we say the agenda and any attachments are available 5 days before. But in order to do that, I think we need to change a request to have an item of business placed on the agenda must be received at least 6 working days before the meeting to at least 6 working days before the agenda review. Because if we're going to make that change, we do have to give our staff time to get everything in order.
Well, policy 2335 doesn't say attachments. It says any supporting information or materials. So I think we should be consistent with what we're saying so that there's no confusion on supporting information sitting at our desk or versus attachments. So if we want to change it to that or say, and including, I just want us to be consistent. And my main point in bringing this up is, at what point does the general population have a chance to preview the attachments / supporting documents that we can see and they cannot until the day of the meeting?
Right, and we're in agreement when it comes to 5 days. What I'm saying is there's a lot of times where we get information in our packets that could be considered a supporting document. And when you start getting requests for, okay, give me this supporting document that you helped to craft the agenda, I think it could get out of control. And what we're really looking for is to make sure that the same agenda we're looking at with the slideshows and all the information that go into our board meetings is available to the public at the same time it's available to us.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So number one, I agree that, any supporting document is a public record. So, it sounds like the desire is to have it made available to the public on Assembly, for example, at the same time it's available to board members, which is absolutely, perfectly fine. If it's not available on Assembly, someone could still request it. And as long as it's an existing record, it has to be produced. So it's just a matter of what the board prefers. But I just have a question about, if administration has an item on the agenda, but the materials are not ready 5 days in advance, is that agenda item going to be considered, or will it not be considered because the materials were not ready in accordance with the policy? And I think that's a decision that y'all are going to have to make, because sometimes, the PowerPoint is not done until the day of the day of the board meeting. And so, you might want to have some language in there about, the goal is to have it, or it should be available, or it will be made available to the public at the time it's distributed to board members, or, just something like that. Or you might decide, if it's not ready 5 days in advance, we're just going to not consider it. So that's just a decision y'all need to make.
Well, to that point, Ms. Steiner, I think that's why I was saying where it says must, a request to have an item of business placed on the agenda must be received at least 6 working days before the meeting. I think we should change that to at least 11 working days before the meeting. So that would be the Friday, 2 weeks before our board meeting.
Or could we say 6 working days before the agenda review meeting? Because that's basically what our starting point is when we talk about it at the agenda review, that could possibly be the trigger for presentations and supporting documents to be put together.
So I think what all of you probably don't understand is that by having 2 meetings a month, all we're doing is preparing for board meetings.
I know, I hear you.
And then there are other things that you're asking for. So it's sometimes what's happening is the reason why board members, you're not getting the presentations until that Saturday is because we are doing things like we're preparing for another board meeting, then there's something else that someone wants. So if we can just have a drop dead deadline as to when information has to be asked for before we have to present it. Because again, having 2, that means that 1 week we're preparing, the next week we're presenting, 1 week we're preparing, the next week we're presenting. That's what we do in board meetings. And I don't think everyone understands that. And in between, of course, we're having committee meetings. And in committee meetings, is something that's coming out of the committee meeting, I want to see this. And so if we can just get a consistent schedule as to what really wants, this is a whole nother conversation. I just think, I don't know if, even though you think you're making it simplistic, you're actually making it more for us. So my question is, what is it that you want? And can we deliver what you want? Because I think if you give us the agenda items 6 days or whatever before, then we can create the presentations. But when we're getting agenda items the day of the agenda meeting or the day before, or we're getting 12 items in addition to what's already there, it's hard for us to come up with things. And then that's a reflection on us, not on the board. So I think we need to have some type of understanding of how many days and then what the expectation is.
So Dr. Faust, I completely understand and hear what you're saying with that. And that is a concern of mine as well. All I would like to do is be able to maybe over the weekend, and that's to read some of the documents so that I can prepare myself for Tuesday. And if I have any and I'm just using myself as an example. So this is for the whole, board to decide on, but so that I have Monday to ask questions of you, so that I don't have to take up board time to ask those questions. So that is what my thought process was on there. So my main reason for bringing this up was not to talk about the day, even though I'm very willing to talk about the number of days. My point in bringing this up was do we need wording that says a proposed agenda and supporting documents? Do we have to add those words, supporting documents? Or is that when we say a proposed agenda, does that imply all supporting documents? Because that is not what's happening. So and I understand, well, I have a feeling about this is because I'm just going to go ahead and say it right out loud, is our media tends to get a hold of our policies and our agenda items before we even have a chance to review them. And then there's stories, all over social media and regular media when we haven't even discussed the policy, or discussed the agenda items. So I do have some concern with having it out there too many days, because that's a lot of time to create stories. But that's a whole nother issue. So my point was, does proposed agenda mean attachments? And if it does mean attachments, then we are not following the policy that we have written. So I just wanted clarification on that. And I am completely open to any number of days that we put there for how much notice we give. It is a little frustrating sometimes when I read over the weekend and then only to find out on Tuesday that I thought I was prepared and the attachment has changed. But that's just going to be on me as a board member. I'm going to have to do more checking. That's my job, and I will do that. So is it possible, Dr. Faust, that we create an agenda one time a month these are all the things we want to talk about in this month, and we're going to do this many at the first meeting and this many at the second meeting. Is it possible to do that so that we're not having so many? I mean, and you only have to post the second meeting at the time it's there, so that does give your staff more time to prepare. I mean, is that workable or allowed?
So you can certainly, I mean, you could have one agenda meeting to develop the agenda for both the regular and the interim board meetings. I mean, you could certainly do that. So every month you decide what the agenda is going to be for both meetings. That's certainly permissible. And as to your other question about the consistency between 2330 and 2335, the first sentence of that second paragraph under B is just duplicating what policy 2335 is already intended to do. So you could strike out that sentence entirely and just rely on policy 2335 if you are, or you could repeat it verbatim and it would just duplicate it. But I don't think that, I mean, 2330 is about developing the agenda.
Right.
2335 is about delivering the agenda. So if you want to be consistent and avoid confusion, you either have the same language in both places or you strike out the extra language in this policy.
I would prefer to strike out the extra language and let's just have one policy. So we have one policy that talks about the agenda and one policy that talks about the delivery of the materials. That to me makes the most sense. And then with the second most sense, developing one committee, one meeting for the agendas, and then we decide how to break it out. I mean, so do we have to say that in here somewhere? That 6 working days before the agenda review meeting, so that we, and then if we had to add something in at the last minute, then you're not last minute, in between, we could, because something may have surfaced, but that would be up to the superintendent, as to what might have surfaced from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. Nelson, Pete, what are you thinking?
I think we should just say 6 working days before the agenda review meeting. I do have a question, Ms. Stagner. Is it possible that we could just change our policy and forbid board members from adding to the interim meeting? Is that something that you could do?
Yeah, I mean, the policy.
What we have is a situation.
Yeah, the policy can prescribe the structure for developing the agenda however you want. At the meeting itself, if there is a motion and a second to add something to the agenda and the entire board approves it, then it's going to be added to the agenda. But the board as a whole has control over that. So, but you don't have to allow additions to the proposed agenda. And what we're talking about here is a proposed agenda.
Right.
So, you can have just the chair and vice chair and the superintendent come up with a proposed agenda. But at the meeting itself, board members have the opportunity to add things. And the question is it more conducive to regular order of agenda items added beforehand or to have them added at the meeting?
And I personally think.
I would say, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Pete. Go.
No, I was just gonna say, obviously, the answer to that is we would rather have it before so that like Dr. Faust and his team can prepare and that kind of thing. But, it does say in policy that it can be added at the meeting. So, I mean, I guess the obvious is if we can have it added before the meeting, then everyone can prepare, even the other board members can prepare and do their research and their due diligence. But, I mean, it is, I guess totally okay for someone to add as long as they have a second and the majority of the board votes for it. So, I mean, I think we want to keep this as simple as we can, but we do want to be transparent. I think that's I think where Ms. Crable is going with this whole thing is, giving the, our constituents the ability to see what we're going to be, discussing, and that way they can also prepare.
And I also want to be respectful of the time and energy that it takes to prepare for some of our questions and our and our agenda requests. That an occasional add something on to a meeting, it is okay, because perhaps the senior staff and the folks in the room can can talk to it. But all that really does sometimes is we throw it on the agenda and people aren't prepared to talk about it robustly. And then we have to come back and talk about it again. It shouldn't be the norm that we add something to the agenda every single meeting. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Or 12 things.
Pardon me?
I think, I said, yeah, or 12 things. And I think there's, obviously a couple of people who like to try to use this as their chew toy and
Well,
just sort of muck up the works, and we gotta stop that.
that's beside the point. We don't need to go there with that. We just want to talk about us as a board and operating more smoothly and to follow our own policies. And if our policies aren't reflective of what the board wants to do as a whole, not as one single person, then we need to change that policy.
So
Or
let's,
suggest that change to the whole board for consideration.
yeah, let's go ahead and change it to 6 days before the agenda review, and move on. Because I agree, I think we need to make sure that people have access to information as early as possible.
Okay, so if we do that, then that is, do we have to discuss having only one agenda review for the whole entire month? I mean, Dr. Faust, would that work for you and your team?
If that's consistent, then we can do, use your word, have the robust discussion. We're fine with that. I mean, we can prep and make sure that the elements that are needed are in the assembly in that time, because we will have more than enough time to get them there, and we'll know who is going to present what should be presented. We'll just be planning a month out.
Okay, so that, Deborah, do we need to put that in the in our policy that there will be one agenda review per month, no matter how many meetings that regular board meetings or interim board meetings that we have? One or two?
You can certainly add that. So what I might suggest is in the first paragraph, the chairperson and superintendent will place items on the agenda. Take that second sentence and move it, down to the end. So then talk about 2 board members may contact the superintendent to have an item added, agenda, blah, blah, blah. And then at the very end, put a request to have an item of business placed on the agenda by any person, including board members, must be received at least 6 working days prior to the agenda setting meeting. There will be one agenda setting meeting per month. I mean, that would be one way to do it, to make it crystal clear, if that's the will of the committee.
I think that sounds great.
I
What
like it.
do you guys think? Pete?
Yep, I was talking and being muted at the same time. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that way there, we can go ahead and plan, for the whole month, and it would be a lot better for us as we move forward, I think.
So Deborah,
All right.
And do you want to take out that first sentence of the next paragraph and just leave it to policy 2335?
I think that would be great. But what do you guys think? Having one policy talk about the meeting and one policy talk about the delivery of materials.
Yep, I think that's excellent.
So Deborah, would we take out the whole paragraph, or would we just, no, we only take out the first sentence?
Yeah, just the first sentence.
Okay.
Because then the last part just describes what the power that the board already has to, by majority vote, change the agenda.
Okay. And then, so do we need to keep in there the last sentence in paragraph 1, C policy 2310, public participation regarding agenda requests, because that is also seems to sometimes be a point of contention, especially of late.
Well, it does, I mean, again, it's a cross-reference.
Right.
So to, to the extent it's helpful, you can leave it in.
Well, it's only helpful if we're going to follow it.
Well,
So,
so let me pull up 2310 and see what that says.
okay. Because they would, the public would most assuredly have to follow the same guidelines that we follow,
Right. So we would need,
agenda
so
setting.
if you want to do that, you probably would want to change 2310. I will say, the agenda setting meeting has typically not been it's not a public meeting because it's not a majority of the board and it's not a standing committee. So it's not noticed. So members of the public don't necessarily know when that meeting is going to be held.
Gotcha.
And that's problematic. So you could in policy 2310, just have a date, by the first day of every month, or just, not allow them to request an item be added to the agenda for a specific meeting, but just have them be able to ask generally for items to be considered on agenda, and let the superintendent and the board chair decide when and what meeting that would go on. That would be another option.
All right, so since I didn't ask to put that on the agenda, let's just hold that one. And let's leave it, let's leave it as it is right now, and then we can talk about that next policy committee meeting. Does that sound better to everyone? So that, because people who are following along, including board members, all these policies are all interrelated, and I don't want people to get lost in that. So
I think that's fine. Let's just move.
And I'll maybe, as I'm making the changes to this one, I will look at 2310 and see if there's send you some suggestions to look at.
Okay.
Question, just for clarity, for the 6 days, is it 6 days before the interim meeting and 6 days before the regular board meeting, or is it just, are we saying 6 days that we have to have the information out for both?
I would like to suggest that we have one agenda setting meeting, and where we list all the things we're going to talk about in the month of September. And then at the agenda setting meeting, whoever is there, board chair, superintendent, and the invited extra board member, decide what goes on the regular meeting and what goes on the interim meeting, so that we already know what we're going to talk about in September. Because if we didn't have an interim meeting, then we wouldn't talk about it again for another month. So this allows you and us to kind of prioritize, what do we need to hear now, what is time sensitive, what is not, that kind of thing. So that's all I'm trying to say.
I was speaking more so to the agenda when we post it. Are we saying 6 days for, like, is it supposed to be one agenda, everything that's on there, and we put all the attachments for the both meetings at that one, or is it 6 days before the regular board meeting and then 6 days before the agenda meeting? Before the interim meeting.
Dr. Fest, I think it's, we're looking at 2335. It will be provided 5 days before the meeting. So the agenda, the actual proposed agenda and attachments would be 5 days before the board meeting, whatever meeting it is.
Okay, got it. That's all clear. I want to make sure it's clear.
So is that doable?
It is, yes.
Okay. All right,
Especially if you know a month ahead of time what's going to be there.
What's going to be there, and then your staff can prioritize their work too. They know what they have to present the first Monday, the first Tuesday, and what they have to present on the third Tuesday. And we're all geared towards that.
Ms. Crable, I'm gonna go ahead and recommend that we put that on there actually for not second reading, but that we amend, the amended policy, I think, can come to the board at the interim meeting.
But I would also like to see, if Ms. Stagner can do this, I would like for her to put the proposed writing out for us to look at so that we know what we're bringing to the entire board to make sure that we are clear on it, because it's going to have to be posted. So with our meeting notes. So Ms. Stagner, can you do that for us this week?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on 2330? If not, I will say we can move that forward. Okay, and I think we covered 2335 as well. So we can move on to,
Hold for a second. So are we saying that we are leaving 2335 as is?
that's my understanding.
Okay.
That's correct.
And did we get, and just making sure I got clarification, that proposed agenda means the agenda plus attachments?
That's what I understand.
Is that right, Ms. Stagner?
If we're taking out that sentence from 2330 about the proposed agenda, then it doesn't, we're just taking that sentence out, and we're going to refer to the more descriptive policy in 2335.
Right, but the language is the same there when it says, so it does say in 2335 that we have to post the supporting documents.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's that. So we don't have to change that. Okay.
Well, let me look at this. It talks about advanced delivery.
Yes.
And it just talks about being provided to board members. It doesn't say anything about being provided to the public.
Oh, that's
Like I
right.
said, those would be public documents. Does the board want those things to be posted on Assembly, or do you want them to be available at the request, like a public records request? The board's getting it on Assembly.
I would
So,
rather it be on Assembly, because otherwise we're just creating more work for our communications department in public requests. And it would just be much simpler if we say that the superintendent shall provide the following materials to each board member and to the general public, or because if that's all it takes, I mean, that's all that the general community wants, is to be able to see what we see in real time, so that they can ask questions of us, and then we can ask questions of the presenters for that.
well, Ms. Crable, would you like to, instead of just, deleting that sentence from 2330, go ahead and add that language to 2335? So again, it's all in one place. The proposed agenda will be available for public inspection when it's distributed to board members.
Yes, that's what I would like to see. And the rest of this committee, Pete and Nelson, weigh in on that.
I think
Yeah,
one
that's-
thing too, I would say, the concern with the public records, and I think I'm still correct that, that the school system has, I think, up to 45 days to get them. Is that correct? 45 days?
No, 45 days is a time limit within student records for complying with FERPA, but public records have to be produced, in a reasonable time. So depending on the request, what a reasonable time is might depend on how big the request is, how much work it takes to compile the records, et cetera. The board, can certainly say that, they'll be posted on Assembly for board members 5 days ahead of time, and, they're going to have public access through Assembly at that point.
Yeah, it just makes more sense. Even, where it says, reasonable time, it could actually be 7 days, and it would be after the
After the
fact
meeting.
at that point. Yeah, so, if we're gonna do it, let's put it up there for them.
Knowing that we, hoping that our community will give us the space and the opportunity to ask questions on their behalf through a meeting that they can attend, or rather than have all of our attachments reviewed in the media, because it's going to be hard to comment, and it's not effective to comment on stuff like that until we get a chance to hear it. So there's nothing we can do about that, but I'm just throwing that out there because a lot of people are watching and I want them to hear my concerns. So did we decide that we're going to take the first line from 2330 and insert it as part of 2335? Is that what I'm hearing is okay with this committee?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, then Ms. Stagner, can you send us the wording of both of those policies so that we're clear?
I'll circulate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll circulate revisions to both of those, and then both of them would move together to the interim meeting for any revision.
okay. And is 5 days a good day, guys, or do we want to have something less? Other
Five is good.
4. 5 still?
I'm happy with 5.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm good. Thank you for those two.
Okay, moving on to policy 5070, public records retention, release, and disposition. Ms. Small, I believe you have a scheduling fee for us.
Well, thank you. I did want to discuss, I guess it's a little bit further down in section D.
Did you say D like dog?
Yes, sorry, with the mask, I'll pull it down. D, right. So there's only one word I wanted to ask you to consider a change based on what I had recalled our discussion, and then I can pull up the proposed fee schedule. Let's see where it is about. There's a sentence that starts, any such service, special service charge must be reasonable. It refers to actual labor cost, and I thought we had discussed average. Average for clerical and average for administrative, and that is what I have on the fee schedule, so people will know what to expect, and it won't be different depending on who's working on it. And I wanted to know to hear the board's reaction to that.
So you would like to get rid of the word actual costs and insert average costs instead?
Yes, average labor costs.
Let me take a look at the statute, though, because I think the statute speaks to actual labor costs. But let me double check that while you're looking at the fee schedule.
Well, in that case, then when we basically would just put this language on the fee schedule, and I can pull it up, but I was thinking that you wanted something that we could tell them, that they could see in advance before they requested. But can I share my screen? Oh, I guess this has to stop share. There we go. Let's see, share. Got to figure out where I put it. Sorry. Here we go. Can y'all see the fee schedule?
We can see it, but it's rather small. You can make it any bigger.
Yep. Oh, too big. Sorry. How about now?
That's good.
Okay, so
Thank you.
this is just a list of fees that we have posted on our website. Normally bring it to you in September, October. I was planning to bring it to the October meeting because I knew we were waiting to discuss this policy. So the only change for this year, other than changing some policy reference, would be this section that I was adding about public records. And so I had just, included part of the policy about the charge per page and that kind of thing. And then just was hoping to change to average, but if we can't, then we probably would just say actual labor cost and stop and not give them, a fee. We would just put this language on the fee schedule. If we were able to do average, then I was recommending for clerical, which is I picked the clerical level that's most likely to be working on this type of thing, and took, that sort of an average salary there of 25 per hour. That's not the salary, but the salary and retirement contribution is our total cost, FICA, all that stuff. And the average for administrators would be 40. So, and that's at the director level. So I can take that out completely and just have the language from the policy. And then we would have to figure it every time based on who's working on it. So it's your pleasure, really, whichever way you want me to go with that.
Ms. Stagner, do you have any information on whether or not?
The statute only allows you to charge the actual cost.
Okay, then I must have misunderstood that discussion. So sorry about that. So I will basically on this fee schedule that I would be bringing to you at the October meeting, hopefully this policy would go by then too, so that we could, you'd be approving both the same night. I just didn't want to refer to a policy that wasn't approved by you yet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have a question.
I do think it's, I'm sorry. I do think it's fine to include the information about the average costs in the fee schedule, but what's actually charged. And so people will get an estimate of the special charge in advance, so they would know.
Okay.
So,
And I have a question, because I thought we had said that there was a minimum, basically if somebody wanted 2 pages, we weren't going to charge them. Is it, and there's, it does say, lower in that, 4 hours worth of work, but, so are we charging them, if I come in and I want 3 pages, I'm going to be charged 75 cents plus something else, or is that, it says May, but.
Yeah, it says May. So I had assumed only if it was very, if it was a large request, for.
Okay.
So also understand that we've created a position, so we've had to hire someone to handle this, specifically just this type. That's how much work we have. So the board, technically with benefits, you're going to be spending about $50,000 or more for an employee to do this.
and yeah, so it was my understanding that that these fees only applied for extensive work, which was more than 4 hours. So if it was 4 hours and 1 minute, then they were going to get charged, for that, 1 minute, or maybe we just don't even say 1 minute, but anything more than 4 hours, they get charged for. That's what we talked about. And that's what I have in my notes.
I think the way I read it, and Ms. Stagner can help me, is that if we estimate it's going to be more than 4, we tell them up front.
Yes.
And estimate, and then we would charge. If we estimate wrong, if we estimate 3 and it's 5, then we can't charge them. Because, but I may be reading.
I don't know that I read it exactly like that. That okay. If it's going to be 4 hours or more, you're going to charge them for the entire time, for the 4 hours that is spent. Or the 6 hours or the 8 hours, whatever it is. But that, in shorter periods of time, if it's estimated that it's only going to be a short time, I think once you get into it and it looks and it turns out it's going to be more than 2 hours, then you would at that point let the person know this is going to be longer than we originally thought. The estimated charge is X. And so you would be charging them the actual cost for anything that was more than 4 hours.
Okay.
So let me paraphrase that. So to make sure I understood it right. So if it is 4 hours or more, then they are going to be charged for the whole amount of time, not the difference between 4 hours and what it actually took. Is that correct?
That's the way I read the policy.
Okay, so, but that's wording that we added, so we can change that, right? Or is this, does this come straight from statute somewhere?
No, the statute allows you to charge actual costs for copies and to charge actual costs for or extensive, the language in the statute is extensive use of information technology or labor. And so the board decides what's extensive, and the board has decided 4 hours is extensive. And you can determine that, you know, you will only charge over and above 4 hours, but this is the language that was already, you know, the committee, at least, I don't remember if it actually went to the full board, but this is the language the committee approved.
So,
I'll stop sharing so y'all can see that.
so what do we want to say, Pete and Nelson? Do we want to say the whole amount, or do we want to say anything only charging for above 4 hours? Because still 3
Yes,
hours of time is a lot of time.
Well, I think we can just say anything. I mean, I would kind of prefer to say anything above 4 hours. I know some requests are really tedious, time consuming, but some are legitimate. And so, you know, I think anything above 4 hours.
So
Uh,
only above 4 hours. So everything less than 4 hours is free, except for the 25 cents per page. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I would say.
And can we just get clarification if the board wants us to always charge the 25 cents per page or just when it's excessive?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to, Mary Hazel.
Because the May makes it seem to me like in certain situations. I mean, I
Right.
really think it will cost us more to collect 25 cents for 3 copies than it would to actually, you know, charge them.
Can we just say for anything over a certain number of pages?
Yeah, maybe 50 pages.
Okay.
Size 50 was what I was thinking.
Well, there you go. Great minds think alike.
That's why I don't know how we came up with it.
I think
I
50
guess
pages.
we both got lucky. Yeah, 50 pages sounds about right to me. That's
So then do we change may to be will be charged?
will be charged 25 cents per page for copies greater than 50 pages.
Right.
Plus the actual cost of making those copies, is that right? Because that's what it says.
Yep.
Estimate, yes. Based on our contract. At some point, I assume, Dawn, did that come from our contract? Not sure
Well,
where the 25 cents came from.
I think that when I proposed the language, that's just what was proposed, but it needs to be the actual cost. So if there's a different amount that you're actually, that would be the number that you need to have in there.
I'll have to defer to Dawn and find out what's in our contract for copies, but we can do that.
If you'll just let me know, I can,
Okay.
when I make the requested changes to circulate,
I'll send
I'll
that
add
to you.
that.
Okay, I'll look it up and I'll let you know.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Do we need to say anywhere in here about that we have a fee schedule? Just that we have to refer to a fee schedule? Because parents will probably see this more like in a handbook of some sort, because most of the fees are regarding, you know, students. They're not regarding the public. So how would they know how to look at, know what the fee schedule is unless we, now I don't want to put it in policy what our fee schedule is, because we could change it, you know, from year to year, but even though it's prudent of us to review our policies, but where do we put in that there is a fee schedule so people know clearly that it's just, they're not getting jerked around?
I'm not sure where it is in policy. I know that it'll probably have to be in the policies when we update for finance, because it is a legal requirement that's relatively recent that we published an annual fee schedule. Last year was the first time that we had to put it on the website. So I know it is required by law, but I don't know which policies reference it.
Okay.
And we certainly, you know, we have it on the public page of the finance website, but we can, you know, certainly refer to it if you'd like.
Just doing a very quick search of your policy manual, there's a reference to fee schedule in several different policies, in the community use facilities policy, in the student, you know, fees policy. So it may not be that there's one policy.
Okay.
So we could certainly you know, include some language that clerical and supervisory costs, well, but there's not going to be a set fee for the actual, you know, it's just
Right.
an average. So I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to reference that. They'll be given an estimate of the actual cost.
Okay, so that looks like it's the last sentence of paragraph D, where it starts with, it's 3 lines down of regular type. The school system will provide an estimate of any such special service charge before making the records available and will give the requester the option of paying the charge or narrowing the scope of the request. So would it be prudent to put in there somewhere where it says estimate of any special service charge according to a fee schedule?
But I thought Mary Hazel just said that there's not going to be a schedule for the actual salary because it would change depending on which person was, the board is just going to get an estimate of the, I'm sorry, an average.
Okay,
The fee schedule will actually reference whatever language you have here. And
okay.
we may put averages in there, you know, I could put the average on the fee schedule for information, but it would not be what they're actually charged.
Okay, yeah, just as long as we have that average somewhere,
Yeah,
so
I'll
that,
put that on the fee schedule
yes.
that you'll approve in October.
Yeah.
So
that people need to understand where we're coming from. You know, like, where did you just pull this number out of? Because mine may look different than yours, and you know, it's because mine took an hour longer than yours, you know, sort of deal. Okay.
All right, I will put that on the agenda for second reading in October. Moving on.
Okay.
The
So
next item on our agenda is,
but Deborah's also going to clean that up and send it back to us, right?
yes.
Yes.
The next item on our agenda is the North Carolina School Boards Association policy updates. The first policy that we will be discussing is policy 60/40 goals of the purchasing function. And I think I didn't have anything here. This is the board's purchasing function. Ms. Small, Ms. Stagner, did y'all see anything here that really needs to be dealt with?
we had no concerns with that.
Mr. Wildebohr, Ms. Craybill?
No, I'm good.
No, I look, let me just, jumping ahead. Give me 1 second. I don't think I had anything now. Yeah, I actually did have a question. Taking the maximum benefits, the first section, from all school system monies and furthering educational goals of the board. What are our checks and balances to get to that goal? What, that's a great statement to make, and I think it's awesome. But what happens if, basically, how are we going to, what is the measuring rod on that? Who says if we make that?
So this is just, I think, an observation from reviewing all of the other policies in this section is that you obtain the maximum benefit, that's the goal, and these other policies about competitive bidding and using a list of vendors and et cetera, those are all of the means which you reach the goal by having all of these other policies that control how money is spent and contracts are let out.
Okay. Well, I just knew we had a concern with the yearbook and photos and all that kind of stuff, and obviously the underlying purpose was to get the most bang. Let's put it in layman's terms, the most bang for the buck. But then there was, are we truly getting that if at the end our yearbooks are not as good as other said yearbooks? So anyway, that sounds good, and I'm good with it then. Thank you.
Okay, moving policy 6400 on for first reading in the October meeting. Next up on our schedule is policy 6401 ethics and the purchasing function. Ms. Stagner, Ms. Small.
I had just a comment about number 7 on the second page, just to compare how it is in our current policy, just for discussion purposes. I have no problem with these limits, but our current policy, this is about employees accepting unsolicited gifts or favors, and generally that might be, somebody hands you something at a conference or whatever, when you're walking by a table, that kind of thing. Currently, ours is 25. This is increasing that to 50. And then there's also the annual amount of 100. And I'm fine with both of those amounts. I just wanted to point out to the board that it's higher than what you currently have approved.
I'm comfortable with keeping it at 50. I think 25 this day and age might be a little unreasonable.
So I wonder why there's a reason that McKenna didn't put that in like track changes, like in blue, like she does with all the others.
You may have just missed it.
It doesn't look like she's referenced a current policy number in conjunction with this one. Mary Hazel, do you know what policy that's in now?
I have a list. Hold on. She did not reference the current, I see what you're saying. So let me find, we do have a policy, but I'd have to look it up. Hold on.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, because I always
think it's
read.
under ethics and not purchasing, which is why she didn't reference it. Under the ones that, and actually the board may have already approved those. I didn't even think to look at them. I just remembered that it was 25. So I will need to check it.
It is ethics the one coming under employee ethics.
Yes.
We haven't approved that yet. That's coming up. We haven't gotten to our personnel policies.
But we still
But I'm
have,
fine leaving it that. I'm fine leaving the language in unless there's an appetite from our board members to change it.
but I agree that we do need to reference back where that if we have two things that are contradictory, then we need to reference back to one, because just in case we haven't rescinded it. So we're going to have two policies saying two different things. So we definitely need to figure out which policy that this is in.
And I can try to do that before the end of the meeting. I just didn't think to do it ahead. Sorry.
That would be awesome. So I had a quick question about this one. I mean, I had that question also about the dollar amount, but so does this apply to employees who are on parent support organizations like PTOs, PTAs, athletic boosters, when they have the opportunity to vote on purchases or to receive mini grants from their parent support organizations?
I'm not sure I follow you. You're saying that does it apply to non-employees?
No, employees, because there are employees that serve on parent support organizations, a PTA or a booster club, where they would get, because it says, regardless of, employees directly, or this is the second paragraph, employees directly or indirectly involved in any aspect of the school system's procurement, purchasing, and contract process for apparatus, blah, 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 regardless of the source of funds, must adhere to the following code of conduct. So there are employees who are on these groups. So are they just not allowed to vote on these kind of things?
I am going to go ahead, Ms. Dagger.
Yeah, well, so is it a purchase by the parent support organization?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay, that wouldn't apply. But this is applying to purchases funds. So district, New Hanover County Schools money and purchasing, not what the, New Hanover High School PTO might purchase.
So what about if the PTA or parent support organization purchase it and the school system reimburses them? Or are they not even allowed to do that?
I think I'm just would have to know more about
Okay.
where the money was coming from. But this would, if for some reason, and I don't know how that would happen, but the New Hanover High School PTA was using New Hanover High School money to
No, they couldn't
purchase
do that.
something.
No, we
That
weren't
wouldn't
allowed-
happen.
So if that wouldn't happen, then I don't think so. I mean, if this is money that they raise through fundraising and the parent just happens to be an employee, I don't think this would apply.
And we
Okay.
do have restrictions on financial decisions by employees who are in separate policies, who are serving in that capacity with a support organization. So that
And I would also hope that the bylaws of the local parent support organization has in place some fiscal safeguards as well.
Yeah, there are. I'm just making sure that we get that T crossed. So then it comes down to school PTAs give mini grants. Some PTOs give mini grants to teachers that, in the form of a gift card or something, or a reimbursement. So if gift cards are given, then do they have to be under 50 or under 100, or does that not even count?
I wouldn't think
opinion
that
was-
this would apply to a gift card given as a gift.
Yeah, but
because
PTA
it's not
should
in the
only-
process of procuring anything.
I'm
PTA
talking
should
about-
not be giving gifts to our employees. Their only, I guess, purpose under the law, as I understand it, is to support the school, not the employees directly.
Well, so a mini grant really isn't giving it to the teacher. It's giving it to the teacher to spend, for his or her classroom, or for it's not for his or her to go shopping, at the wine store. It is giving them a mini grant to go purchase, a book set, or, a bookshelf, or a new rug for the classroom, that kind of thing. So that doesn't count in a gift. That counts as something else.
And there should be a gift policy, gift and donation policy for the district. And that would apply to what kinds of gifts and donations can be received and who has authority to receive them and how it can be spent, et cetera.
Okay.
So if
Talk about that.
this paragraph is really applying to gifts and favors that are given to people that are in charge of making decisions about contracts.
Okay, all right, I'm good.
Mr. Wildebohr, were you okay with this?
I am.
Okay, excellent.
One thing, and I don't know if Dawn or Mary Hazel can speak to this, under section 8, it just talks about employees shall not solicit or accept gifts from current providers of E-rate, potential providers of E-rate services in violation of applicable federal E-rate program gifting rules. And anyone that's ever looked at E-rate rules know that it's a quagmire and hard to figure out. So I don't know whether there's some suggestion about an easier way to reference that here. I think there was also in the notes from McKenna something about the board requiring employees to report any offer of a gift as an internal control. Do either of you have some suggestion on that? I'm just concerned about people not being able to know or understand what the federal E-rate program gifting rules are.
So pretty much the vendors that do E-rate, because aren't vendors that typically come in contact with anybody other than my division, because you desktops, laptops, whatever, you can't use E-rate funds for that. We can use it for cabling, and we can use it for our WAN service and stuff. So pretty much most people don't come in contact with those vendors, and my staff know we don't accept gifts from anybody, period. So if you want to kind of put that in there, because I don't even want to take any chances, because if they change, E-rate procedures in the future. So pretty much the rule for the technology division is we don't accept any gifts. I don't care, $25, $50, it makes no difference. We don't accept it.
And in McKenna's note, she does say that, the simplest way to make sure that we comply with number 8 is to just not accept any gifts related to any of those vendors. So could add that.
We could just delete the last part of that sentence then and we're starting with in violation of applicable rule and just say employees shall not solicit or accept any gift from E-rate providers. If,
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was reading McKenna's notes, but I didn't even know enough about E-rate to even ask an appropriate question, because I just thought it was going to be hard if we're going to make people write down that they were offered. Like, we're never going to get that list.
Okay, so with those changes, can we go 6401 on for first reading?
With that change.
Yep.
Mary Hazel, did you have any luck on finding the employee ethics policy that we need to perhaps reference?
I'm there now. I see the, I still can't find the dollar amount, so give me another minute or two.
Okay, all right. I just
I
didn't
did
know if we don't
find-
get you.
I did find policy 2121, which is the board member conflict of interest, which has already been approved. It's a new policy. In that policy, it does mention $50 or less.
And that's for board members. We can't take anything
Yeah.
greater than $50.
Correct. Yes.
I found it. It's 6084 in the old policy manual.
Okay, and it says 25 in there?
Well, I'm hoping, yes, it does. It says that in section 2 of 6084. With similar language to what's listed here, except of items of nominal value less than $25. You know, and then it goes into specifics of, you know, promotional honorariums, meals, that kind of thing. So it's worded in a very similar manner. It just says 25. So we haven't gotten to this policy yet. So possibly for consistency, we should change it to 25 now. And then if the board wanted to change it to 50 in the future, they could. But that's a thought.
Couldn't we rescind that policy when we pass 6401?
Yeah, and I would concur with Mr. Bollier that you know, in today's world, you know, you're kind of getting really touchy when you say 25, because you know, a T-shirt could be worth more than $25.
Yeah, but you know what? This is one of those, I mean, this is, I say it every time, is we can't have two policies saying two different things. And we can't reference, I don't believe that we should reference a policy that we haven't approved. And especially where we have dollar figures, you know, attached to that, because money is what gets us in trouble all the time.
There are a couple of the purchasing policies that I am going to request that you hold until another policy is approved. And I think the next one is one of them. So, you know, if the board wants to wait on this, we can, and just because the other one does cover it until you're ready, but that's your call.
I think we can just put it on for first reading and repeal the policy or rescind the policy once it's passed. I don't think we have to.
There may be other provisions of that are 6084 that will be in other policies later. So I don't know that you want to rescind it until we're certain everything else has been addressed.
I would be fine with holding it. I mean, because it doesn't seem like this is not like a mission critical, and we already have a policy that covers most of it, don't we? Or no, we don't.
Why don't we just set it at 25 and 50 for the time being, and then go back and fix it?
Go back and change it later.
Yeah, that way we can at least pass it.
The other option would be to just revise 6084 to increase it to $50 for now until so it's consistent. And then when you do get to it, you could rescind it and it would just go away. You wouldn't have to go back and change the other one.
Even better. So I'll add that to the agenda for October. We can just make that change, I think, as a board on the fly. It seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay, so we'll put 6401 on for first reading. That brings us to 6410. Ms. Hazel, you think we should hold this? Ms. Small, I'm sorry. Do you think we should hold this policy?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Which policy are we on?
6410.
430. Okay, so I thought 6410 was the next one.
It is.
It is.
Okay, there we go. So there's two areas of this one I wanted to discuss. But does the board have any questions first?
Yeah, I had one question, Mary Hazel. So as I'm reading through all this, the question popped up in my mind. And I've heard this from some schools about that we've changed the way we do purchasing. And I don't know enough about it, so I can't even comment, but can schools purchase on their own, or must they purchase through the purchasing department?
So the question's about school funds. That's where the change came in. And we did
Okay.
some changes where we did some system-wide contracts this year. So
Okay,
it doesn't cover everything, but for when there is a system-wide contract, we're asking them to use that contract.
gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense.
And then in addition to that, last year, when we implemented all the new contract formats,
Yeah.
then the schools also have to use those formats with school funds. So we have a simpler one for school funds, but
Okay,
they have to use that as well. So on this one in number 5, one of the changes with our new ERP system, because we're one of the first counties to go with it, and the state is still, it's just a state initiative, and they're still in the process of being able to, with these new systems, talk to e-procurement. They weren't ready to do that part of the process yet. So we are still doing e-procurement, but North Carolina e-procurement is a very special type of process where a fee is charged to the vendor, which goes back to the state. And so we are sending our purchase orders electronically through, our own e-procurement, but we are not tied to the state e-procurement system anymore. We can still use all the state contracts. We can still purchase from all the same vendors, but the state did not require us to link to North Carolina e-procurement, and it's not technically required for school systems anyway. So this is not something that we're currently able to do, and it's not required by the state for us to do that. So I would take number 5 out.
I'm cool with that.
I think it's a good idea.
And then
Let's do it.
number 8, let's see. So one of the things, this is just talking about how we receive items. So many of our items are received centrally, especially like computers that we have to tag and those kind of things, and then distributed to the schools. But some items we ship directly to the schools. And this is probably, well in the weeds, but I would prefer it say supervising the receiving of, where it says all materials. I would say supervise the receiving of all materials not approved for direct delivery to schools, because we can't really supervise it if it's not being received centrally. But we do establish the procedure. So that second part is still true. Including establishing procedures to ensure all, I would add the word all, received goods are properly inspected, counted, and documented. So we have procedures for all, but we don't receive all of them centrally, so I can't really supervise that. So that's kind of in the weeds. Maybe my understanding of supervising and what is worded here is different. So maybe it's fine the way it is. I just was concerned that y'all might think that meant we receive it all centrally, and we don't.
Well, I think we want to be transparent in what we do, and if a few extra words or changing a couple words make it exactly what we do, I think we should do that. So I think that Ms. Small's recommendation should be honored.
Okay, so the recommended wording change I have would be supervising the receiving of materials not approved for direct delivery to schools. And
Yep.
then I'm adding the word all in the section that says including established procedures to ensure all received goods, and then continue.
Okay, I'm fine with those changes. Any objections?
Nope.
Ms. Stagner, did you have anything to add on this policy?
No, I didn't have any questions. And Mary Hazel can just send that language. I didn't get it all written down, but I'm sure she has it. She can send around.
Yeah, I'll send taking out 5 and adding that language in number 8.
Okay, sounds good. Moving 6410 on for first reading. That brings us to 6420 contracts with the board. Ms. Small, Ms. Stagner.
I had some questions about that, but let me pull up what I did and ask Ms. Mary Hazel to go ahead and if she has anything.
Yeah, I have some things to discuss. I don't know that I'm trying to make any major changes, but there's some confusing parts of it. So I don't have any problems with the first section in A. It's kind of hard to tell with all the blue, but basically what she did is incorporate the language in our current policy in terms of at what dollar amount does the board approve contracts, which is currently 300,000. And then the superintendent approves at 100,000. So my first question is, everybody comfortable with those levels?
Yeah, all right, so I have a question about that. So what is, first of all, for my clarity, what is a budget administrator?
So that's anybody who has authority over, funds allotted to them to manage. So a principal is a budget administrator, a director, possibly even a supervisor, depending on, anybody who's sort of the grant director or program director for.
Anybody that has responsibility for a budget.
That's right. They're the ones deciding what to purchase out of funds allotted under their control.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
And they generally become the contract administrator for any contracts that come to the board. And that's why I have that language in there.
Okay. So when it says that the superintendent, the superintendent can approve up to 300,000, and then the budget administrators can approve up to 100,000?
That is the current policy.
Okay,
yes.
yeah, because I think you said superintendent 2 times. I just wanted to make sure that
I probably did. Sorry about that, but that's
okay.
exactly right. Yes.
Ms.
Okay,
Small, I'm
so-
sorry. I had a quick question to clarify here. When is the last time that those amounts have been changed?
I couldn't tell you. I can find the current policy and see, but it's been several years.
And so I guess my question would be for Dr. Faust and for our NC Papa representative, are those amounts still sufficient? Can you perform your duties with those amounts? Or do you think we should consider raising them?
And while he's thinking about that, Kevin just said that it was May of 17 that they were increased.
Okay, so that was 4 years ago, inflation.
So
No,
my,
they don't need to be increased. I wouldn't want them to be increased.
so I would just, that this paragraph says that service contracts up to $300,000 can be entered by the superintendent, but anyone, superintendent, designee, budget administrator, can enter into a contract to purchase equipment, materials, or supplies. There's no limit. So
That's a separate
the
policy.
superintendent is, this says in any amount, equipment and materials or supplies involving any amount. So under this policy, the superintendent has authority to buy $1 million of new computers or whatever, so long as the bidding process is followed, the state law bidding process. But I just wanted to point out, and I don't know, I wasn't sure why there was a different amount for purchases and a different amount for no amount for purchases, but an amount of 300,000 for services. So
Can we change that? So the superintendent does not want to have $1 million. I don't sign off on that.
We can certainly change that. It's just been, it's been like that for years. So.
So it makes sense to me to have it consistent.
Okay, I think that I support that change.
So where is that showing up in here? There's so many blue lines, so many blues and black. So where is
So
that showing up?
if you go down where it starts, the first black, unless otherwise prohibited in the black ink by statute, regulation, or board policy, contracting authority is granted. Then number 1, the superintendent or designee, or as well as budget administrators, may enter into contracts for equipment, materials, or supplies involving any amount. So involving, it supplies up to or amount less than $300,000.
So clearly it has to be budgeted and allotted to them for that.
Yeah.
So it's, but there are some contracts or some purchases that are large, a curriculum purchase, for example. When we're doing, system-wide curriculum, we make a decision to budget for that, but then, the recommendation of the budget administrator is what goes through. So, whatever dollar amount you are comfortable with, we can reduce it to.
Yeah. And I get this a lot, and the boards approve the allocations, but they also need to approve specific purchases. Again, when I say the board, there are two different steps. One is approving the budget and how much money is going to be spent in a particular area, but the other step is approving that money with a particular contracted vendor. And so there are two different decisions. So even if the board has approved, X number of dollars, the question is, does the board want to approve anything that's a specific purchase over dollar amount, or did they leave that to the kind of weigh in either way? I was just pointing out that there's a difference there. And it sounds like Dr. Faust is more comfortable bringing anything $300,000 or more to the board.
I think that's probably wise
Do that.
to do that.
Well,
Because I don't want as a board member to micromanage the superintendent. But if we set limits, then, and everybody knows them, then we just go with that.
well, and especially if he feels more comfortable with us, giving him the thumbs up on major I know we have millions and millions of dollars, but $300,000 is still a lot of money. And if he feels more comfortable with us giving him the thumbs up on purchases over $300,000, then I think that makes sense to me.
So the
I
other,
heard him say 300,000 was his limit. Did I hear that correctly?
I'm sorry?
Did I hear that correctly, Dr. Faust, that you're happy with the $300,000 limit before coming to the board?
Yes.
Okay.
For any contract services, supplies, blah, 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 all of that.
And would we keep it the same way under 100,000? At 100,000, it would come to the superintendent. So as long as we're consistent with that, we can kind of program our workflow to happen that way.
Yeah, like principals have to get approval from Dr. Faust for anything over 100,000.
They generally don't have that much money, but yes, they
But just
they
in
would.
case,
Yeah.
just in case they were to have that much.
Well, and I think that does, from what I understand, it's also anyone under the level of the superintendent would have to bring it to Dr. Faust. So even, assistant superintendents would, I'm sure they have regular conversations, but still it would need to go through Dr. Faust at 100,000.
It currently says superintendent or designee, but he is not designated for us. He hasn't designated anyone to approve between 100 and 300, and I doubt he will. Is that correct, Dr. Faust? Yeah.
But do we
You are correct. You are correct.
do we even need to have designee, or just leave it in there because in case of an emergency?
I think it's helpful in emergency.
Okay.
the other point that I had like to raise about this policy is in the on the next page, where it's the third, looks like it's about the third paragraph down, about continuing contracts. It says certain continuing contracts, lease purchase contracts, and installment purchase contracts must also be approved by the New Hanover County Commissioners. There are 3 policies that refer to continuing contracts, and it is confusing, at least it was confusing to me, because the policy that actually is labeled continuing contracts does not refer to the statute that requires county commissioner approval. And I emailed McKenna about it, and she said, yeah, it's a little confusing. You might want to change it, but she didn't give me any suggestions about how to change it. And it's also not clear to me from this one that lease purchase agreements and installment contracts are the only ones. Is there something else by a separate agreement with your county commissioners that requires approval? So just wanted to clarify that.
Ms. Stagner, I'm
Not
happy
aware of
to,
anything.
I'm happy to reach out to the county and have a discussion on that. I know that
Well, I mean, I don't want you to have more like, you know, micromanaging from the county than you need to. The statute just has, there's certain things that have to be approved by the commissioners in statute, but where this just said certain continuing contracts, and she said she brought that over from your existing policy, I wondered if you had something already in place. Mary Hazel, do you?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the wording on our current policy, but I thought our current policy just referred to those two that are listed there, you know, as per the law. So I probably wouldn't have worded it as certain continuing contracts. I would have just said, I would start with the word lease.
Yeah.
You know, lease purchase contracts and installment purchase contracts must also be approved by the commissioners. I think that might be an easier way to solve that problem.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But
And then we can handle the continuing contracts part under the continuing contracts policy 6425.
Right. Because
Okay.
it does kind of make it sound like all continuing contracts have to go to commissioners, which they don't. So.
I'm fine with doing that, but let's make sure, Dr. Faust, at some point, could you reach out to Chris to make sure there's no contract that they have to approve, so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot?
Only when you get into land purchases, and that's dealt with in a separate policy.
Okay, great.
I did have a question backing up to the first page if we could. And I'm gonna try my best to explain this because it's a little bit confusing, but at the bottom section, the bottom paragraph there is talking about when we bring change orders to the board. And so, and the board does approve all, number one, all contracts for services. And then number two, all contracts that extend into the next fiscal year. And sometimes that's regardless of dollar amount. So, you know, if we have a contract that runs from May to August and it's for $40,000, the board's going to approve it, you know, regardless of the dollar amount. But then when we get into how we handle change orders below, it kind of makes it sound like we have to take all change orders. The way we always interpreted this, but I think we need clarification from the board, is that if we have one of those crossing years and the board approves it, which you do, we only look at the change order issue based on dollar amount at the 300,000 level. So we wouldn't bring, like if we amended that carryover contract, we would, and it was, you know, $5,000, we would not bring that amendment back to you. But I wanted to make sure what your wish was. So if you look at the last sentence, when a change order causes a contract to exceed approval levels, I think that to me is talking about the 300,000. And then in the last sentence, for all contracts approved by the board, and then it goes into change orders, I would say for all contracts exceeding 300,000 that are approved by the board, that to me, that will separate that issue. So we're not trying to calculate 25% increases in contracts approved by the board, even if they're really small. Because I don't know that you want to see all those small adjustments to contracts. And I know that's confusing, and I can read through the whole thing if you prefer, but there's a lot in this paragraph. But there's one about what the board has to approve, and there's the other about when change orders need to come back to the board. And so right now we have two rules. We have 300,000 and we have increasing the cumulative contract by 25%.
So are you
suggesting
to take out the cumulative contract amount by 25%?
Now I want to leave that in. I just think it's important that for everything that we're talking about after that last sentence that says for all contracts.
Yep.
I really think that the intent of the previous board was for those over 300,000, but I could be wrong. So we can read that together and see what you want to do. It says for all contracts approved by the board, any change order which causes a cumulative contract amount to increase by 25% of the original contract must be approved by the board and submitted along with previous change orders. And any additional 25% increments are the same. My question really is that only about those dollar amounts, or do you also want to see 25% increases in that contracts approved under number 2 at the top of that paragraph that cross years? I know that's really in the weeds, but hang on with me.
Ms. Small, I would prefer to have for all contracts approved by the board over $300,000 and then continue on. I think the intent of the language is to make sure we're looking at those $300,000 contracts. So that's the way I would recommend that language.
Deborah, am I missing anything there?
Well, I'm just trying to read because I completely get what you're saying, Mary Hazel, that makes sense. But then also for number 3, 4, 5, I mean, are those also going to always exceed 300,000?
They may or may not. I think the issue with those are different types of things that we need to bring to the board regardless of dollar amount. And the issue is for change orders, do you only care about dollar amount is really what I'm trying to say. So 2 is an example, but you're right, it applies to 3, 4, and 5 too. So whenever we do any of this unique type of purchasing, regardless of dollar amount, we'll come back to you. But for change orders, the only 2 rules that we have been enforcing are the 300,000 rule and the 25% rule. And if you want us to do more, I need more guidance.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Mary Hazel. But
so we'll just add, I'll send you that with just that one small change just to clarify that. And I think we're good. So that was the hardest part of today's discussion. So we made it through. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
In section A, in the second paragraph, the last sentence where it says the finance officer shall maintain a listing of administrators granted budget authority by this program,
Yeah.
or by program. Is the finance officer you?
Yes, it is. I am the finance officer. And
We need to call you the chief financial officer?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, the finance officer is a duty in the law. I think in most of your policies, you have changed it, but even if you change my title to chief financial officer or anything else you wanted to call me, I'm still the finance officer. So but for less confusion, we should probably change that to chief financial officer. So going on to back to the second page, the 4th paragraph. There is a reference about the facility contracts. And I guess my question for all of this is, do we need to bring all these at the same time? That was part of, evidently there's a couple of places where we say this doesn't apply to facility contract. So is it okay? Is that wording okay as it is now? Or like change orders for construction and repair contracts, if that's dealt with somewhere else, I guess that's okay. It's just a little confusing because we hadn't approved that one yet. But if Deborah doesn't see a problem, we can leave it as it is.
Mary Hazel, you're after my heart because I had that one down too, but then I'm knowing that we're hoping that we approve moving up the, I think we just did. We approved moving up facilities, so that'll be coming next month. But yeah, anything with the, I mean, I don't like to contradict myself at all, or have 2 policies saying this or approve something that we haven't even talked about.
I think with some of the, especially when you get on the bidding side of the bidding policy, the rules are different. So I get why they're separate policies. I just want to make sure that we don't have anything that's inconsistent between the 2. And so for now we can leave it, but it may mean we have to come back if there's something that's changing that we hadn't thought of.
Okay.
It's just hard to know until I see those policies. So.
Yeah, because there are a lot of facilities policies referenced in the cross-reference section.
So that's more just sort of a warning. And so a little bit further down where it says at least monthly, this is not something in our current policy and we've never done it. Doesn't mean we can't, but the superintendent shall report to the board all contracts and contract amendments approved by the superintendent designate under this policy. And then you would put in a dollar amount of your choice. So the question is this something the board is interested in? We haven't done it in the past, but we could.
Well, that was the question I had highlighted here, because I'm like, I didn't think we had ever done it. And it says, you know, it's in the black. So it's something we should have been doing, I guess, all along.
Well,
I think that's-
these are, you know, these are recommended policies. Not every provision in the School Board Association recommended policies is required by law. They do have a lot of requirements, but I think this is, again, Mr. Wildebohr, this is one of the checks and balances that you were asking about earlier, is how do we know when our goals are being met? And this is one of the ways. And I would say if this is something the board wants to do, you don't have to do it at a board meeting. It could be a written report. It could just be a list that's sent to the board.
Okay.
So is monthly too frequently, or is quarterly more appropriate?
We could do either one.
I think monthly would be better, just so that you expect it every month versus, you know, is it coming this month? Is it next month? You know, I'd rather see it. If we're gonna do it, let's do it every month.
I mean, it's something we can run from our system. It's not that hard to do. I just didn't know what dollar amount you were interested in seeing.
Yeah, what dollar amount? I mean, I think it can be kind of high.
And this is just contracts, and then we'd also need clarification of, you know, sometimes, and maybe the law does not distinguish, you know, we have contracts for services, and then we have contracts for purchases of goods, which is a purchase order. And so I want clarification. Does the board want to see them both? And it sounds like you probably do. And then what dollar amount?
What do you think,
What's a good
Nelson?
dollar amount? Do you have a recommendation, Mary Hazel, on what's?
I don't. And it's really up to you.
So like, let's say we said 100,000, is our list going to be, 5 pages? Or,
Depends on the time of year.
okay.
But there's not going to be that many, probably above 100,000. So
they're going to see 300,000 anyway.
Yeah.
So
I definitely will. We could start with 100, and if you feel like it's too long and you want to see less, we could change it in the future, I guess.
Let's go ahead and go. Let's go with 100.
Yeah, and then, I mean, it's probably a good idea, especially for so many of us that are new to the board, just to see what you're spending, I mean, to see where our money's going, on a regular basis.
So I'm assuming, because this says contracts and contract amendments, I do need clarification though. Are we just talking about contracts and services, or do you also want to see purchase orders?
I would interpret it as including any expenditure of money under it, whether it's purchase or of a good or a service.
Okay. Got it.
Good with that.
We can do
I
that.
would prefer to see this spreadsheet or something. I don't think we need to take up our meeting time with breakdown. I think it'd be better digested than have it sent.
We can send it if you're not happy with the format the first time we send it, you can let us know and we can change it.
Thank you.
Good.
Anything else on this very weedy policy?
So does this one also have words that Deborah's going to do for us? There's a couple places that you're going to add in.
Yes, I took some notes, so I will run that by Mary Hazel first and then circulate it.
Okay, but we think we're good to move it forward after we see what you wrote. Okay.
I think so.
Okay, moving policy 6420 is amended for first reading. Pre-audit and disbursement certifications, policy 6421, Ms. Hazel. or Ms. Small and Ms. Stagger.
Sorry, I was muted. I don't have any questions.
So in the notes, McKenna has some information about electronic payments that are authorized by this. And in order to do that, you have to adopt a resolution, and there's some specific steps the board has to take. Is that something that has been approved in the past, Mary Hazel?
It has been approved in the past, but if you would prefer to put it in the policy, we can, because we pay quite a bit electronically. I didn't understand that.
Well, it just, I mean, I looked at the, pull up the rules. So in order to, and it's really having to do with, for the board members that aren't aware, when you get a written contract, you have to have the pre-audit certificate on it, which the finance officer signs off, says that the money exists to enter into this contract. When you have an electronic payment, you might not necessarily have that paper that gets the pre-audit certificate. And so there are some state rules about exemptions from the pre-audit certificate and the disbursement certificate for electronic payments, which says that the board has to adopt a resolution, and that there's an encumbrance system in place with written policies and procedures for tracking obligations and internal controls. And so I just wasn't sure if all of that had already been done. If it's already been done and you're already complying with the North Carolina administrative rules, then no change needs to be made.
We have the board, and it's been relatively recently that we updated it. About 2 years ago, we updated it when we made some changes in how we do our P cards, and we brought all that to the board because at that time the LGC changed some of the rules, and we brought that resolution to update the board. So
Okay.
if you want to incorporate any of that in the policy, we certainly can. I just wasn't prepared to do that today, but
No, I don't think it needs to be incorporated in the policy. We just need to be sure that the homework was done.
we've done that. Yes.
Okay, that
So
I don't have any changes.
so I had a question about when I was reading through McKenna's notes, the third dot, down at the very bottom, where it says, if the board would like to allow cash as a payment method, we have to include that in the policy. So, and
We
consult
don't.
our board attorney for advice. I mean, do people pay cash anymore?
We don't pay anything by cash.
Okay.
I would want to do that.
Okay, so our policy doesn't say anything about cash. So that, do we need to say that we do not take cash, or is that just?
Are you talking about taking cash or pay by cash?
It says if the board would like to allow cash as a payment.
That's a payment, a way that we make payments, like a petty cash, and we don't do that anymore. I don't think it refers to receipt of cash.
Well,
It does.
I don't think,
cash as a
I don't
payment
think
method.
I don't think-
This is talking about the board spending school system money being spent, not taking lunch money from kids or fines for library books or something like that.
I knew that. I was just saying that, I mean, I took this to mean that we didn't allow our vendors to pay us with cash.
Well, we generally pay them, so, and we don't pay anything by cash. So
Okay.
show me what part you're talking about, because I'm not finding it.
No, I don't see it in the policy 6421 at all. I'm looking in McKenna's notes. If you go down to the third bullet,
Yeah.
and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the bottom.
Oh.
If the board would like to allow cash as a payment.
We do not want to do it.
But Ms. Craybill, if you start at the beginning of that bullet, it says the
Okay.
boards have authority to allow cash to be used as a payment method for bills, invoices, salaries, and other claims. So allowing the school system to use cash to make payments. And that's not what the school system does, according to Mary Hazel. So I don't think you need to do anything.
About it. Okay. Yep. I just have never even thought about cash because
The only time we did it in the past was when we had petty cash, and with P cards, we've gotten rid of petty cash.
okay.
So that used to be something, maybe a cafeteria manager would have to run out and get another head of lettuce or something. And then we had a process for petty cash, but I don't believe that is, I think we closed all those accounts and we only use P-card for that now.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, then, Mr. Wildebohr, are you okay with 6421 being moved onto the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, 6421 on for first reading.
I only
64,
have the comment on number 6 where it says finance officer, is that, the chief financial officer? And then in that same sentence, it was talking to us about, you got a lot of reporting to do to us, Mary Hazel, at least on a quarterly basis for the overall debt load.
I had that same question and I was going to recommend to you that we do that on an annual basis because we already do that in the financial statements. And that seems to be the most appropriate. We don't have much debt because most of our debt is really county debt. We only have like the copier lease and those kinds of things. So it is my recommendation you go with annual. If you'd like it quarterly, we certainly could add that to our list of things to do.
annual's fine with me.
Yeah, so is that a law, the quarterly, or is that just a suggestion?
It's a suggestion, I believe.
Yeah.
Sorry, which policy are we on? I'm sorry.
Continuing contracts number
6425.
My computer froze up for a second. Continuing contracts. Okay.
Yes, and it does say in McKenna's notes that the time frame in number 6 can be modified. So if you don't think there's much information, then let's just, go with some longer time period. And if you feel like-
we report in the format described here in our financial statement.
Okay, so we don't have to say at least, we can say report to the board annually.
Yes.
So this is the policy that I was referring to before about continuing contracts and requiring commissioner approval. And I don't know that if you need to move it here since it already is included in 6420, but it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense to not talk about it here and talk about it in the more generic policy, but I'm happy to defer to Mary Hazel on that one.
I just want to make sure I understood your question. So as it relates to number 6 or just in general? I didn't quite follow you. Sorry.
No, just this is a policy about continuing contracts that specifically includes the lease purchase and installment purchase that require commissioner approval.
Right.
But it's not referenced at all in this policy. And I wasn't sure why the School Board Association didn't make that information available in the policy that's very specific to continuing contracts and put it in the more generic purchasing policy. But if you think that makes sense, then I'm not going to argue.
We could certainly add it here and take it out of that one. I'm not sure it needs to be both places, but whatever your preference is.
It does say in number 5 that policy 6420, the contracts with the board must be followed. So I mean, it's just doing double work to go back and find it.
I mean, the other way to go is just that some of these bullets could be incorporated in that other policy and you wouldn't really need this one, but it's just a little confusing to go back and forth. I do agree. But I would need a minute. If you wanted to consolidate them, I would need a minute to figure out how to do that. So. This is not something we do that often, so it is a little bit unique, which is probably why it is separate.
Yeah, it seems to me that under contracts, we could just have a whole section that says, continuing contracts. So let me look.
That might make it a little easier to follow if it's all in one policy and you would combine this one.
Yeah, because it could be.
That's fine.
Yeah, and maybe it goes into like part A, authorization to enter into contracts, and either B could be continuing contracts or A could be 1 and 2. But I think it needs its own paragraph. I mean, to call out specifically.
might be a little easier because there's so much in A that applies like all the time. And some of
Yeah.
these are really unique situations to maybe let it be D in policy 6420. And then just, if there's anything that repeats, we'll take out, what's repeated. But I would need to work on that and send a draft to Deborah, if that's the board's pleasure.
That's
Yeah,
fine
I
with
would be
me.
good with combining, because sometimes having so many just becomes confusing. And then you have to go back and remember, to do them all.
Are y'all okay with it being a separate section?
Yeah, I am.
And it may make sense for it to be C and then move that other applicable
that's what I was
policies and
thinking.
laws to D. Okay.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
send that to her.
Okay, so we are moving on. 6425 will be combined with policy 64.
So we are going to move them both along and then contingent upon
No.
getting wording.
No, we are going to morph 6525 into 6425 into 6420. We're not going to move 64.
Well, no, that's what I meant. We're gonna merge them, and then we're gonna call it, we're gonna take out 6425 as a policy, and 6420 will absorb it.
Correct.
And
That's
that's
correct.
all going through to October 1st reading.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
6430, purchasing requirements for equipment, materials, and supplies. Ms. Hazel, or Ms. Small, sorry. Keep doing that to you, and Ms. Stagner.
So one significant thing on this that I didn't think of until this morning, which is not that helpful for you, is that in May of 21, the board approved a micro purchase resolution that allowed us there's a whole process and approved by the local government commission, and we brought it to you and allowed us for our federal purchases to only have to bid at the $50,000 level instead of the $10,000 level. So it was a flexibility within federal law because we have all this federal recovery money. And so the board approved that. And at the time it said, and also included in your policy. And I said at that time, we will bring it to you when we bring this policy. And I didn't remember it until this morning. So I am going to need to incorporate the language from what the board approved in May into this. I haven't done it yet. So if you want me to bring this back next month, I can, or I can just tell you you approved it in May and I can consolidate it in this one. I just haven't had a chance. So I did want to mention that to you because this is the policy where it would belong. So.
Okay, let's go ahead and move this policy to the next policy committee meeting unless there's objection.
Hold it for the next policy committee meeting.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got the words right. But before we do that, I just want to ask a couple questions as we're making the changes. So is the purchasing director, who's that?
That's Kevin Lee.
Okay, so he's here. Okay. And then we only have to have 2 bids, not 3?
Everything that's in here is what we understand is required by law. Certainly if we can get more, we do.
Okay, and I just thought somewhere in the law or in best financial practices that 3 bids, because that's always been what everybody's used, but it's saying here that 2. I'm fine with 2, but I was just clarifying.
Okay.
Policy.
So are we good to move on then?
Wait, somebody's talking.
Kevin has a comment. He's just got to get closer so you can hear it.
So the federal policy says a reasonable number of bids, which they don't define. But we, especially if it's a formal bid, we're gonna put those out to get formal bids. If it's informal, then we have to get quotes. And so we're always trying to get at least 3. But it all depends on what you end up getting. The federal law says reasonable number.
Okay.
And I didn't see where it said 2 in here.
It's in the second paragraph, the very last line.
At least 2, it says.
Yeah, at least 2.
So we're
Okay,
trying
I
our
always
best to get,
thought it was at least 3, but that's fine. I'm good with it.
well, in the state law and the federal law, neither one say 3 bids, but we've always tried to do that.
Okay. That's fine. Okay, so on page 2, this is just like a wordsmithing thing.
I'm sorry, Ms. Crandall, Ms. Crandall. So I would really rather just move on from this because we're not gonna be putting this policy on for first reading until November. And we're gonna have another
Why not
chance to
make all the
discuss it next
changes at
month.
one
And we
time?
only have 50 minutes.
All right,
What's
I'm just trying to have us have to make changes 2 times. But all right, if that's what you want to do, we'll move.
All right, bidders list 6441.
We had no comment on this one.
Me either.
Me neither.
That was fine.
I had a comment.
Yay, Eddie.
Hey, now I just wanted to, it doesn't specifically say, but I'm assuming that this is referring to equipment of purchase of goods and services, and it does not apply to construction contracts because some of the language of this is contrary to the bidding procedures for construction.
So I'm sorry.
Is this something that's done? Because it's not, so number one, this confidential list is not required. And it's allowed, it's not required. And is it something that you already do or have any desire to do is the question.
Well, I can only speak from the construction side, and we do not do this. We actually provide the list of potential bidders openly. It's actually advertised from a lot of the private companies that follow, construction bids, and it's used as a way to notify subcontractors and other subs of subs and material suppliers. So making this list public in a construction contract or a construction bid is really vital to the process.
So could we just simply add language accepting construction contracts, the identities of contractors who have obtained proposals for bid purposes
Well,
are confidential?
You could, but I guess the question is there any reason why you don't have to have this policy at all? You don't have to have confidential bidders list. So is there a desire to have this confidential, bidders list, or do you just not want to do it at all and just not have this policy?
We don't need it.
Yeah.
If it's inconsistent with how we purchase different things, it is how we purchase a lot of things. But if it's not what we're doing in construction, we could leave it off because we don't have it now.
I'm good with not having this policy.
All right, hey, goodbye to 6444. 6441, excuse me. So let's move on to 6442, vendors list.
We were okay with that.
Ms. Stagner?
The only thing I had a question about on this one is if the superintendent or designee develops a list of potential vendors and someone or some company is not included and they, want to be included, is there any process for them to appeal their exclusion from that list?
I don't think we.
Is this something
we just include them at their request, or based on our experience in the past. So it's not an exclusive list unless I'm reading it wrong. It's just, we might send it out to the folks who are normally on the list, but others, it's public, could certainly bid as well.
Right. Well, and I understand that. I just was wondering if there was a decision not to include someone because of prior poor performance, et cetera.
Yes.
Would they have any any recourse. I wouldn't want someone to claim they had been denied the right to participate or compete because they were excluded and not have any way to appeal that.
You want to speak to that?
I
I'm
will.
gonna let Kevin speak to that.
Sure.
That has been extremely rare that someone has not been allowed to bid. So, but we have had vendors fail to perform. So they bid, they were the low bid. Our leadership team met with them and discussed their bid, made sure the expectations were clear, and they still failed to meet the bid. So the next time we bid for that service, that's well documented, and the department knows if this vendor bids again, then that discussion is going to come up. But we have typically not come out and said, you can't bid at all.
Right. And so maybe I'm not being clear enough. This policy isn't about who gets to bid. This policy is about who gets to be on a list that is sent out to have particular information made available to them. So if you let anyone who wants be put on the list is put on the list, I don't think that's a problem. And you don't have to accept their bid if in the past they've performed poorly. And that's one of the criteria, but it's really two different things. This is about, this is providing opportunities to people to do business, and we're going to give you information. We're going to put you on the mailing list. Is there ever anyone excluded from that list and not given that, heads up?
No, people aren't excluded from that list. And to become a vendor, we have to make sure we get their W-9 and their contact information and what services they provide. And we're vetting them against the, the state has a debarment list, and so does the feds. And there were some other rules that the state had about our Iran list and things like that. So we have never had a vendor who wanted to be a vendor that we didn't include them.
Yeah. So this policy says the superintendent or designee has the discretion to determine which vendors are included on the list and may establish standards for being placed on the list or for remaining on the list. And it just seems to me that opens up a question if you're just keeping a list that everyone can be part of. And I may be making more of a deal out of this than needs to be, but it says the superintendent is going to create this list and establish standards. And I just wondered, how are you doing that in practice? And is there a way to appeal that?
When I had the question along those same lines, because it says the superintendent has the discretion to determine. And so what discretionary factors is he putting in?
Right. And
don't
so
like
clearly
the
this
comment
isn't
on-
our current policy. This isn't something, the way Kevin described it is what we currently do. And so our only discretion is if they've been prohibited by state and federal list. So if you want to change the wording to say that, we could.
Do we need this
Policy
policy?
may be modified.
Do we even need this policy? I mean, I like the last sentence of the superintendent is encouraged to include vendors listed as underutilized businesses, but do we need this? Is this more harmful than beneficial?
It feels really detailed and not something that needs to be at the level of board policy, but it's your call.
I mean, I'm not aware of any legal requirement to have this policy. It seems like something that you might do to make sure that people are getting information. But if you're already getting information out to vendors, I'm not aware of a legal requirement. I was trying to look for one this morning before the committee meeting, and I could not find one.
There are
Well,
some legal references, and I could look those up, but I haven't yet.
If we don't need it and it's actually more cumbersome than beneficial, why don't we send it, the same way as the policy before it? And just delete it.
That would be helpful.
There we go.
I'm fine with that as long as there's no objection from Ms. Stagner.
I will double. 115C 522 is the first legal reference, and there's nothing in there about requiring a vendor list. I'll take a look at 147, but I don't think there's a requirement.
Look at us, we're streamlining.
Hey, off. That gets a black line on my list. Do not want.
Okay, so Ms. Stagner, if you find something differently with regards to that policy, could you just email us and we'll put it back on
Yep.
at the next policy committee meeting, but otherwise we will discard and advance to policy 6450.
I will do that.
Thank you. So 6450 is purchase of services. Ms. Small, Ms. Stagner.
A little bit more fun with this one. So no questions in the first paragraph unless y'all have anything. And so in the second paragraph, I got to remember why I changed this. Hold on a minute. Sorry, I just can't get my head around it. Give me 1 second. So in the second sentence, which is about 5 lines down of the second paragraph, it says service contracts will be supported by a purchase order to encumber funds, and I want to slightly change the wording in that because of our new system, because in our new system, we can do purchase orders, or we can also encumber contracts, which is a different, it's a different thing, but it does all the same math of encumberancing, and it manages the budget the same way. It just doesn't send a PO, because if you already have a contract with a vendor and everybody signed and everybody has the original documents, we can then encumber it as a contract in our system. So I would prefer that language read: service contracts will be supported by a purchase order or encumbered contract. And that gets us to the same place. It's just slightly different language with our new system. Any questions on that?
I'm good with that.
Camera keeps moving. And then I didn't think the last sentence was necessary in that paragraph, and I'm trying to remember why.
And that's the one in black.
Yeah. So before we had the ability to do what I just described, we would do that through a PO that kind of had a bid proposal for, attached to it. So if somebody had a quote for services, and it was, I'm trying to think of an example, and I can't really think of, usually it happened more in the maintenance area. And sometimes in technology, they would do a quote and then we would encumber it through a PO. So it became a contract. They gave us a quote, we gave them a PO, it became a contract. But with our new standard contracts that we're using for all services, I just don't think that's necessary anymore. So in all of those situations, we will actually have a service contract. So I don't think we need that sentence, because that came from our old policy. That is not something that was recommended by McKenna.
So are you talking about the line that says contract?
Service contracts below the board approval level. So the blue paragraph, the second.
Oh, okay, wrong one.
sentence.
Okay.
I would just take that out. So we change that next to the last sentence to service contracts will be supported by a purchase order or encumbered contract. And then the rest of that paragraph would be deleted. Because the only point of that was, a way to get a quote encumbered that we were accepting, but now we do that through a contract. And then the other question that I had, which is going to be, it's not really a question, I just wanted to point out to you that we have a lot of, we basically have all the federal purchasing policies in our procedures manual, and they're referenced there in that next to the last paragraph with uniform guidance. And we do have all that in place. It's pages and pages of requirements, but it's not the policy. I don't think it needs to be, but I just wanted you to know that we have all that in our procedures. And there's also a reference in the last paragraph to a policy. I didn't know what that was, but I think it's just excluding those types of contracts from this policy. So I guess that's fine. And they are covered in other facility policies that we have in place now, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, I just have one question for clarification. It is the 1, 2, 3, third blue entry where it says no contracts may be entered into with current employees or service providers who should be classified as employees rather than independent contractors. Is this where it kind of falls into that parent support organizations cannot pay for a custodian to be there, they cannot pay the custodian directly. They have to pay through facilities use, or they can't pay the cafeteria manager directly. They have to pay through facilities use. Is that where this would be covered?
That's not what this is about, but that is also true.
Okay.
We are required that all payroll be paid, all of our employees that work for us, whatever they're doing, if we're paying them, it has to be through payroll. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This is saying that when we make that decision, whether somebody's going to be a vendor under a service or going to be an employee, there are certain federal guidelines that we have to decide based on the work. Are we supervising the work? And Deborah could go into it and probably talk for an hour about it, but there's a lot of rules that decide when something's appropriately a contract versus an employee. And we're saying to you, we're going to follow that law. That's what this paragraph.
This
And
one's talking about
And
co-employees.
also, yeah, I think this also says, though, that no contracts may be entered into with current employees. So the district cannot enter into a service contract with a current employee, and in addition to their normal duties as an employee of the district. And then you can't bypass the employment requirement by having a contract with someone who should be an employee by just calling them an independent contractor to avoid those human resources requirements.
Gotcha.
I skipped that first part, which is really important. Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah. So,
But all of that is true, and that is all in our current procedure.
Okay.
I had one question. For the same reasons that the board looked at raising the 25 to 50. I know it sounds like a big dollar amount, but honestly, $100,000 in most of our service contracts is not a big dollar amount. Can we consider raising that dollar amount so that we could informally negotiate service contracts and not be required to go through a formal RFP for anything over 100?
I have no problem with that.
and I would just point out, there's no formal bidding requirement for service contracts at all. So this is a self-imposed requirement to get RFPs, and you have discretion to do that or not.
So do we take it out or do we increase the number?
I like the self-imposed
previous.
requirement, but Mr. Anderson, do you have an idea on what
Well,
you said 100,000?
I would not take that out. I think, but maybe we raise it to 300 and that aligns with the board approval threshold.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Mr. Wildemore, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm fine. We definitely trust Mr. Anderson, so we're good with that.
So that doesn't put us in any sort of like if you're negotiating up to this dollar amount, that doesn't put us in any, not I don't say jeopardy, but in any commitment situation. You're just allowed to do it up to that. I mean, to start talking about it up to that amount without coming to us first. Is that what this kind of means?
Well,
So I think that, for purchases over certain dollar amounts, purchase of equipment and goods, you have to use the formal bid. There's state law that covers bidding procedures. For services, you're not bound by that.
Okay.
bidding requirement, but to then get better prices, you will look for, send out a request for proposals for service contracts as well. And it looks like the language in the past was for anything that's expected for proposals, instead of just going down and saying, we're going to enter into a contract with ABC, company to provide this service. And I think Mr. Anderson's just saying it's for those $100,000 or $200,000 contracts, it's more time consuming to try to go and get additional quotes instead of, and he wants to raise that amount.
I definitely, there's nothing in the policy that would prohibit us, I guess, from doing it at for lower amounts when we thought it was appropriate.
And we have.
I would like, if you increase it, I think it might be helpful that we have some sort of language about who's going to make that decision. It says, unless otherwise approved by the superintendent or designate the board. So at this point, anybody who has budget authority could just contract with whoever they want without an RFP if we go to 300. So it's a big jump. I understand where he's coming from, so it's your call. But I think there might be times when we're trying to meet the goals in that very first policy that we might recommend they do it when it's less, depending on the type of service. But the policy wouldn't prevent that, so we should be okay.
Just a question, would you rather stay at the 100,000 then?
I hadn't had time to really think through all the examples of
You're our chief financial officer, so if
I
you think
know,
it's
I
better
know,
to
but
stay
I
at
wasn't prepared. I hadn't thought about this one. I just read over it. That's what we do, and I was okay with it. So,
Well, it would not impact the budget administrators because they're already limited to $100,000 in purchasing authority or contracting authority. So
okay.
this would really only, if you raised it to 300, it would really apply only to those contracts the superintendent was able to enter into without board authority.
Right. The issue though is by the time it gets to the superintendent, they've already sort of, negotiated all that or gone through the bid process. You don't really see it at the beginning of the process. And this is the part which is the beginning of the process when we make the decision, because you wouldn't want to have already sort of negotiated the contract with a vendor and then say, oh, by the way, we were supposed to bid this at the very last minute. So that's why I'm hesitant.
Would you rather us put this, hold this for next month?
Yeah,
Look it
and
over?
I'm not opposed to it. I just need to think through what
Okay.
is best. If we could hold this to next month, I think it would be helpful.
Let's go ahead and hold it then. If Ms. Graybill.
Okay, that is fine.
And I just recommended 300. I mean, Mary Hazel, if you're more comfortable with 200, I mean, I just used that number because it was one that was already established for board approval. I'm not
Okay,
opposed
well, why
to it.
don't we talk with probably 200. I might feel a little bit better about. Let's spend some time looking at some examples and then we'll bring it to the next meeting if we could.
So we're not
That would
going
be
to.
my recommendation as well.
So this
That's
one's
okay
going to
with
stay in policy?
We're going to hold it till next meeting,
Okay, gotcha.
if that's okay with you two. I'm only one vote, but it makes sense that says you're jumping into something. Let's get it right.
I'm good with that.
Okay, well, there we go. Mr. Boyer?
Is he off?
I think it's frozen.
Yeah. Nelson, we can't hear you.
I'll call him.
Want me to call him?
I got him. I got her pulled up already. lost you. Oh. Okay, just to let you know, we decided to hold 6450 till next month. Oh. Okay, all right, bye. He's coming back on. Say he's not sure why it dropped him off, but he's getting back on. That might be a good time to get some more sweet tea.
Hey, Deborah, while we're talking, or while we're waiting for Nelson, what do we need to do to meet the legislature's requirement that we have to have a policy that says we will vote on masks each month? McKenna sent us 4 copies of things to choose from.
So you can adopt a policy, but you do not have to adopt a formal policy through the policymaking process in order to comply with the statute. My advice is that you do have to vote every month. The board has to vote every month, but you don't have to adopt a formal policy and vote to revise or amend that policy every month. If the administration has presented a plan that addresses face coverings, the board can vote on that plan every month and whether to change or eliminate, the requirement every month. So the word, it really is that the word policy in the statute is somewhat misleading, I think. They don't mean it when they say policy, they sort of mean what your procedures are going to be. They're not using a very specific language the way that we think about policies in the school board world. So the School Board Association sent out two sample policies. I don't think you have to adopt either one of those. I think it's sufficient if every month the administration brings you a proposal for face masks and whether to continue with it or to revise it, then you vote on it and make that decision on a monthly basis.
Okay. So that's basically just a standing agenda item.
Yes.
Until we get through this.
Yes.
Okay. And would that be and that's only a once a month. We don't have to do it at a regular and an interim.
Correct. Just once a month.
Kim, will you be sure to include that somewhere in our minutes? I know you
Yes,
can't
ma'am.
answer me, but. Oh, is that you, the big K?
Yes, ma'am, I'll include it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so can we move on to 6,500 goals of equipment, materials, and supply services? I apologize for my Zoom interruption.
I have no concerns on this one.
I have no concerns. Board members, Ms. Steiner?
Pete went to get tea.
Okay.
Good. No, I'm good. I'm back and I'm good with this one.
All right, so 6,500 on for first reading. Next up is policy 6510, organization of equipment, materials, and supplies. Service. I'm not sure who would take us through this one. If
I
it
can
would be
certainly go
Dr.
through it, but I didn't have any concerns with it.
The only question I had was when in letter C, where it says the issuance of equipment, materials, and supplies. Do we need to have some sort of verbiage in there about what happens if an item is damaged or lost, and do they have to pay for it?
I know we have a procedure for that, that Dawn, when they issue an item and they sign for that, but I don't, I guess we could add that language to the policy. But I don't,
It's in the vandalism thing.
it might be in the vandalism thing Kevin is saying. I have to go to the vandalism
I looked
policy.
at the vandalism, and in vandalism, it says that that's just talking, I mean, that willful destruction of school property. But I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, if you drop your computer and you break it, or you color on it with, a Sharpie marker and you can't get it off, that, or a key falls off. I don't think that's vandalism.
No. Dawn, can you speak to what our requirements are when we issue a computer?
Yes. So when it's accidental damage, such as, we all drop things, we don't
Right.
necessarily throw it, but we all accidentally drop things. Accidental damage, key falling off, we don't charge students for that. We actually pay insurance for that, or we will be doing that as we move to one-to-one. What we do charge students for truly is vandalism, literally writing on it with a Sharpie, throwing it across the room, stepping on it. Those are the things we actually charge both staff and students for.
So do we want to just even have a line that, accidental damage, you want to say is allowed, but, the accidental damage will not incur fees, or just leave it blank?
So you have currently a policy under your old manual, 4220, property and resource management, that says, about when a user is assigned an item, they shall accept personal responsibility and must accept the risk of loss or damage. If loss occurs due to carelessness, negligence, or misuse, the user may be assessed fees. Parents or legal guardians of students may be charged for damage. There's a provision under your code of conduct about intentional damage to school property. So I don't know if this 4220 is going to show up somewhere else, or whether that language needs to be merged.
I think we should merge something in there, just so that we've got ourselves covered when something happens.
I can check with McKenna and see where that 4220 is going to show up, if it's going to show up, and if not, we could take that language and add it to this one.
Okay, so is that worth holding then?
We also have on the fee schedule that you'll be approving in October, but same as last year, damage to school property, other fees may be charged to recover costs for lost or damaged school property, which includes but is not limited to technology, instruments, or books assigned to students and staff. So that is similar language that if you want to add it, you may want to put here.
Actually, so I'm looking at, let's look at 6520, because that does reference this policy. It does reference policy 4220, so it does look like this is supposed to, but she hasn't included that language. See if the next one does.
I don't see 4220 in the next policy.
No, if you look on the chart, the correlation table.
Yeah, I did see that, right.
Yeah, it doesn't look like she incorporated the language from 4220 about fees for damage. So I could certainly do that and circulate it for the committee.
Is that going to be a quick change, or should we just hold it till next time when we're talking about the well, we'll talk about the fee structure in October before, actually, that's at the October board meeting, right? Not at the October policy meeting?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so so you were mentioning policy 4220, correct, Ms. Dagner?
Yes.
So the correlation of that would be that 6525, which talks about instructional material services. And I've written on there, because that one talks a lot about textbooks. And so I actually
Yeah.
wrote on there laptops, one-to-one. So that might be the one we might need to change
Right.
to include.
Right. Well, I had a whole bunch of questions about why we're talking about textbooks.
Yeah, I did too.
but and I don't know I mean, it does seem to me that it does seem to me that instructional material services policy is a little outdated, and we could combine, I mean, talking about damage to school system it might make sense to be more holistic in talking about the different types of things that students might have be checked out to, employees might have checked out to them, and their responsibility, because it's not just about students, it's also about teachers. Teachers damage a whiteboard or something like that, they might be responsible if it's something that they should have been more careful about. And I don't know what all the ins and outs are, how you've normally done it, but you do have a current policy on it that hasn't been incorporated.
Yeah, because they've got, and the correlation table 4220 is in there multiple times.
Yeah.
6510, 6520, 6520.
Yeah.
Five.
Yeah.
And 6550.
So I guess my suggestion would be to maybe hold 6510 and 20 and try to incorporate policy 4220 into those.
One thought I had originally and then decided not to share, but now because of this discussion, I think we might need to. To me, 6500, well, especially through 6521, are really all talking about the same thing, just different aspects of it. So I just didn't know if they needed to all be approved at the same time, or if they just needed, I guess one is first just a goal, or could they be consolidated in some way?
Whose department is this? Like, who would take the lead on that?
It kind of depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about procedures that we write for collecting fees for lost textbooks, even though we don't have that many textbooks anymore, we still have a handful. That's finance, or it really happens at the school level, but we write the procedures for issuing equipment is through technology, but we certainly agree on those procedures. So it's kind of cross-functional.
I do think there's a lot of repetition in these that we might be able to streamline and achieve the goals of the board a little more easily and less cumbersome method.
So if you want us to work on rewriting that and bring that back next time, that the series could be brought back. Not all of it, but this.
Yeah, I would like to.
I think that would be best.
Yeah.
That would absolutely be best. All right, it is currently.
But wait a minute, did we just approve the whole thing going back? Because there are some others that we or just wait.
We can keep going through the list. I think some are a little bit unique in what they're addressing, but that's right. Up to y'all. I don't think we need to consolidate this whole series, but these first, 6500 to 6522 could probably be, or to 6521 could probably be consolidated.
Yeah.
6522 starts talking about a whole different thing.
Yes.
So I don't really know that we have time to get through 6522
Right.
before 12 o'clock. And I actually have class at 12:30. And I do want to make an announcement before we close, as we talked about at the opening. We are going to be switching around our NCSBA scheduling, and we will be moving into the 9,000 series with Mr. Eddie Anderson on our policy committee meeting for October, rather than continuing on with personnel. And we will circle back with personnel when our new HR director is established. Are there any questions about any of that?
No, that makes sense.
All right, I will go ahead and entertain a motion at this time to move policies 2330 and 5070 to the board for amendment.
2330 and 2335 and 5070.
Thank you, Ms. Crable. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
And here, before you keep going, Nelson, I just wanted to bring us back to the three that I want to suggest three different motions that when we're putting these together. One is obvious, return to policy committee. And so we'll have those. One is move forward to first reading as presented, no changes at all. And then number three would be move forward with proposed changes that are forthcoming, because that's where I think sometimes we miss on getting the proposed changes.
So we do not need to move to return anything to the policy committee. We're just not taking action on it. We don't have to vote to take no action. But please make the motion.
Here's what my thoughts were on that, Nelson. We do in our minutes, we say we're holding it, but then there's no note on there anywhere. Why are we holding it? Like if they're like just with that 3620, that I couldn't approve the July minutes because I couldn't understand why we were holding it. And luckily Mary Hazel, had a brain alert and was able to remember that. So I didn't know if anybody else cared about that level of detail on what are we holding it for, because we do make a note in our minutes that these policies will remain in the policy committee. So I wanted us all to be clear on what we were moving forward and what we were holding back and what had else be done.
So, and I think there's actually a distinction between moving something forward as presented and moving something forward with pending changes.
Yes.
And then holding something for further discussion in the policy committee at the next meeting.
Yes.
So there's really, yeah.
Yes.
Maybe
I just wanted to capture that in our minutes so that we're all clear on what we are expecting changes, from whoever, like Mary Hazel might have to put something together, or you might have to put something together, just so we all know what we're expecting.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table to move policies 23, 30, 50, 70, and 23, 35 to the board to review proposed amendments. There's a first and second. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Did you say that those three policies that we are waiting proposed changes?
No, we have made the changes and we are
No,
moving
we
those
haven't.
three
Deborah
forward.
was going to, we talked about them, and Deborah was going to make the wording changes and circulate them to us all. So I want to say that the motion is to move those forward for whatever reading that you're saying that we're going to have them for, and at what meeting, with pending these changes that come to us. So that's what I want us to be real clear on.
Okay, so go ahead with your
So the motion is to move
motion.
2330, 2335, and 5070 onto what reading are we moving them to? Or are we just moving them to a meeting?
They don't
go
on
need
for
a second
Okay. So we're just moving them to the,
or first reading. Just revision for revision.
well, 2330 and
Oh.
2335 are already existing policies that we are just making changes to.
Right.
See, 5070 is a brand new policy that we don't have, and that we
Oh.
have to have it on some sort of reading. We've already had it on first reading.
Okay, so that 5070 would be going then for, thank you, Ms. Craigle. I didn't realize adopted. That would be on for second reading with additional changes.
Yes, and at what meeting is that going to be at? At the October 5th meeting? The
I-
October regular meeting,
Yes.
not at the September, 21st meeting. I just want to get clarification because we had a real hard time with this with 5210.
I thought the decision was to put 2330 and 2335 on the interim meeting for revision
That's what I'm just clarifying.
and 5070 on for first reading or second reading in the October board meeting, since we've already had it for first reading.
Second reading at the October regular meeting. Okay, I just want to get that clarified. So that will be my motion. Or do I have to have two separate motions because we're doing them two different ways?
Yes.
You can have one motion as long as it's clear. So what I wrote down is that policy 2330 and 2335 would be going on the September interim agenda for revision. Policy 5070 will go to the regular October meeting for second reading.
Yes, that's my motion.
Is there a second?
You can second.
Second. Ms. Craigle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote aye.
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Craigle, do you have a second motion?
The second motion, no, you go ahead and go through your list. Well, I guess we'll just do this. This is what I have: 6430, 6450, 6510, 6520, and 6521 are remaining in policy. Did I get those all? Did I get those right?
Yep.
So that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Craigle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries 3-0. All right, Ms. Craigle.
The next one that we had was, so these are the ones that are going, that would go through to first reading in October with some pending wording changes that we've already discussed that Deborah just needs to do for us. The 6401, 6410, 6420, and with 6420, 6425 is going to be incorporated into that.
Okay, but we don't need to mention 6425 needs to be incorporated. 6420 is being amended.
Okay, that's fine.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Craigle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries 3-0. Ms. Craigle.
So the only one we didn't get to was 6400 goals for purchasing, and that one is going all the way through with no changes, just as we wrote it. That was like one of the only ones. Oh, and the 6400 and 6421. the goals and the pre-audit and disbursement certifications. I have that down that we are not making any, we just checked it and sent it right on.
And 6,500 too,
Yes,
or is,
yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a first and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I also vote aye.
So there's one last
All
thing.
right.
There's one last thing we agreed to. The policy, the old policy 6084, section 2, we needed to bring to the October, that was the ethics policy that we need to bring to the October meeting to raise the dollar amounts. I wrote October meeting, but is that something we can bring to the September interim meeting?
Sure.
Well,
Is
I'm
that your
asking
motion?
Deborah,
you could do it as a revision when you take the other two for revisions.
the 2330 and 2335. Okay, so should I make a separate motion or should I just?
Go ahead, since you've already, yeah.
Okay, all right, so then old policy 6084 to the interim meeting. And I have no problem changing my motion to include that one if that's easier.
No, that's good. Is there a second? I will say. Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right, moving on to our last item on the agenda, everybody's favorite item, the item to adjourn.
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to thank Sherry Ashley from Gregory for participating with us, today, representing NC Papa.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, we are adjourned. A wonderful week to all of you. Have a good day.
You too, sir.
Thank you.